Karunalayam Namami Bhagavatpadam Shankaram Lokashankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashya Kritau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punaha Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bhedu Vibhagine Vyomavat Vyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Gukarastu Andhakaro Vai Rukarastu Nivartakaha Andhakara Nirodhitvat Gururitya Vidhiyate Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryankaravavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So, in the last class, we had gone over verse number 4 from the Gyanankusham. So, Gyanankusham means a forceful reminder to keep your obstacles under your control. Don't let be beset by not being able to complete your journey, so to speak. And so here, this is something that we should think about, that the whole text Gyanankusham, we have already talked about this, but just to reiterate it, is meant for a person who is a Atmagya. Atmagya means one who has been taught about the reality of how the various experiences of life spring up from one, and how through the viveka of the Atma and Anatma, one sees that even though it changes, but the underlying vastu does not change. Very much like water and waves. The waves may change, but the vastu, which is water, doesn't change. So here also the Atma is the ashraya. It's the repository of all the changes, and by itself it doesn't change. So this is the person who knows this, is called Atmagya. And we can distinguish that from people that don't know this, that hasn't been revealed to them. They have not been in a position where this was taught and understood by them, are called Anatmagya, which is the normal starting point for all of us. So this is the distinction between Atmagya and Anatmagya. So this text here, Gyanankusham, is meant for Gyana Atmagya, the first type, which I think all of you and I are. We know what's going on. So this is called Atmagya. So this is a very interesting thing to think about. The same message that we are reading here does not apply to Anatmagya. The question is, how do you say that? Why do you say that it only applies to Atmagya, not to Anatmagya? So to go back, I think we should revisit our understanding of how gains in life are made. and you know this very well, I don't have to really keep talking about it, but just to remind you of the conceptual aspect of it, there are two types of gains that one can have. One is the gain of not yet gained, which is called apraptasya prapti, which is the attitude of the Anatmagya, the one who Anatmagya means Anatman janati iti Anatmagya, one whose conclusions, whose thinking, whose pursuit, whose experiences are all that I am just a person with a body-mind complex and I am dealing with this world outside of me. This is the Anatmagya. That's all there is. There is nothing more to talk about. So this one is Anatmagya. So the characteristics of the Anatmagya is that the gain of joy is like apraptasya prapti. So you don't have the pleasure of doing something that you have not done before, and you do it and you are happy about it. So, and we will go into this a bit more detail as to why this fact is being brought out. But all I'm saying is that the attitude of the Anatmagya, as a reminder to you, you all already know this, is that of apraptasya prapti, as opposed to the Atmagya, who after knocking around in the world and finding that there is a very interesting situation that I'm finding myself in, this requires some reflection on our part. And the interesting situation is that I'm in a catch-22 in life. What is the catch-22? I am seeking happiness, which is not lasting. Any sense of happiness in the world that I get is not lasting. And yet I am not tired of seeking happiness. So look at the catch-22. I cannot get happiness, and yet I cannot give up seeking happiness. This is the catch-22. And the solution to this seems so difficult in our life, almost impossible, that we don't look around for any variance from this. This is this is what is called samsara. So the samsari one is that who is just wandering around looking for some small measures of success and happiness, knowing that I'm not getting it and I don't know how to get it. So this is the conundrum that we find ourselves in. So now going back to the Gyanankusham, why the messaging is completely different for Atmagya versus Anatmagya, is that if you are able to discern that the type of gain that I'm looking for is one that I already have but don't understand it. So this is the very famous sloka from the Mundaka Upanishad. Pariksha lokan karmachitan ayat brahmanaha nasti akritaha kritena. Means that you examine your experiences of life and you find pariksha lokan. You just, whatever your whole life is, examine it. Having examined it, you find that there is nothing that I can do which is lasting. And my happiness is tied to karma, which is not lasting. And so therefore, none of the any joy that I get is lasting. So, pariksha lokan karmachitan ayat brahmanaha. Brahmanaha means who is has a tinge of wisdom in them. And this tinge of wisdom has to come from Ishvara. You cannot will it yourself. You can ask for it, and Ishvara first examines to make sure that you are sincere about it. And if you continue to be sincere about it for a while, then the wisdom slowly comes to you. And the wisdom is in the form of viveka. And finding the right teacher that is who's able to explain to you what the difference is. Why is it that the gain is the prapti is not apraptasya but praptasya prapti. So therefore, having said this, the Atmagya knows that what I am seeking I already have, but I don't get it. It is somewhere near me, but it is somewhere within me, it is me, whatever you can say that, but for whatever reason, nihitam guhayam parame vyoman, Taittiriya Upanishad, that it is hidden inside the crevices of your own mind, means that you are not able to sort it out. It is like a cave of the heart, as they say. Cave of the heart means it's so dark you cannot see anything, even though it is there, but you can't discern. So therefore, the Gyanankusham messages that we are studying, and we will continue to do that today. I will revise number 4 for a few minutes, and then we will go to the new one, number 5. It's completely different for an Atmagya versus Anatmagya. Because the Anatmagya, the approaches to life are totally different. Why? Because it is apraptasya prapti. You are really knocking around looking for it. That credit card situation that you know very well from my example. If you know that it is lost somewhere, then you start calling people and worrying about it. Whereas if you know that for however it is, if you find out that really it hasn't left this home, then it is praptasya prapti, even though it hasn't been found yet. Yeah, that is still there. It is, and so, but the way of looking for it is totally different. You don't have to call anybody. All you have to do is to close your eyes and just localize which room was I in. It doesn't take that long compared to knocking around. Then you say, wow, I didn't go to that room, I didn't go to that room, it must be in this room. Oh yes, I used my credit card sitting on my desk. Close, that's it. You're good, you're done. So therefore, the messaging of, we can conclude this whole background analysis by saying that the Gyanankusham that we are studying only applies to you, not to Anatmagya. Okay? Alright, with that being the case, let us look at what the gist of the verse number 4 was. So the gist of the verse number 4 that we did last week was that looking at other situations or people critically with downplaying them, that this is not good. That person is not good. That situation is not good. So this kind of criticism, internal criticism, you may not do it overtly. And we will see in a couple of examples how it can be done covertly, even though you don't say it. If you pick up the phone and criticize somebody, then you've got major problems. But even if you don't pick up the phone and talk to somebody, but think about others, That is what we are really concerned about. So this critical view of others and other events has three disadvantages that you should be aware of. And if we are, then this becomes Gyanankusha. This becomes a danda, a stick which I am hit with in the form of knowledge. There's no other way of hitting that except through thinking. So this is what we call Gyanankusham. What are the three disservices that I do to myself? All of this is really meant for you, not for anyone else. Not for a minute we say, do not, please behave, don't hurt anybody, and all that is obvious. The question is, how are you hurting yourself unknowingly? This is the more subtle way of looking at it. And so there are three ways that you're hurting yourself unknowingly. Number one, you are, and this was the main topic that we did last week, by passing judgments about others. When you pass a judgment about others, you have a feeling, how can that person do this? I wouldn't do that. It is a very unacceptable behavior on my part. How can this situation occur? I can't believe that it is occurring. How can it? This is the attitude. If you have this attitude, then the first disservice you do to yourself is you disbelieve the presence of Ishvara. You disbelieve the work and the handiwork and the creation of Ishvara. You downplay it as though you are saying Ishvara doesn't know what he's talking about, or he's not there, he's asleep. All these things are happening. I wonder if somebody should wake up Ishvara and tell him, hey, do you know what's been happening around here? You know how this guy is misbehaving? So, really speaking, the first disservice you do is you bring down the very critically acclaimed nature of what Ishvara is, which is Sarvagya, Sarvashaktiman, and never makes a mistake. Everything is right by the book. Everything is based on people's karma phala and all that. You just throw it out of the window. Say, I don't care. All I'm telling you is that this person is bothering me. So this is what it is, that you downplay and ignore, not even downplay, but you ignore the handiwork of Ishvara, and the handiwork of Ishvara is the presence of Ishvara. This is the first thing. And it's interesting. I think I'm going to talk about later. Yeah, it's a related point, but it fits in later, so I'm not going to do that. Number two, you criticize others, and by doing so, you feel better. Okay, so this is it. It's very obvious by criticizing others. Why people criticize others is that you feel better. I wouldn't do that. Why is he wearing these strange clothes that this person goes around in? Doesn't know this is summertime. We should not be wearing dark. I don't know. So many things you can do about it. So by doing so, you smother your own shortcomings. You elevate yourself. So this is what is called manitvam. Amanitvam adambhitvam. Ahimsa kshantir arjavam. 13th chapter. This is called Manitva. Manitva means, oh, I'm above all this. I don't understand how people behave like this. So when you do that, even if you have some shortcomings, which everybody has, you ignore them. You're focusing on your innate superiority compared to the others. So, in fact, you need to be very honest with what's going on with you in your life and so on. But this is not the way to do that, because you have sort of, it's a childish behavior where you are climbing up on a sofa and said, I'm higher than you. And then the other child also gets up on the sofa and says, I'm just as tall as you are. Then you go up a little bit higher. Something like that. This is disservice number 2. And the third disservice is, by criticizing others, you are continuing to waste valuable time in Anatma, as opposed to what you should be doing, which is to examine the very intricacies of the Atma, which is not easy. Nihitam guhayam, it's a cave of the heart. There is a lot to explore. And sometimes we feel somewhat complacent. I'm done. So it's now I'm done. I'm okay now. I don't need anything. And so you declare victories too soon. And so it requires a lot of analysis, continued, because you don't know what life will just throw at you, and you need to be prepared for it. And yes, you've made a good beginning in terms of the knowledge, but there's a lot more to do to complete that process. And instead of instead of spending the valuable time examining yourself, you are now you're tied up in silly things outside. That's the disservice number 3. So that was the gist of the verse number 4 from last week. Okay, so now let us go to verse number 5. Verse number 5, I'll read the Hindi for it first and then explain it. मुझसे प्रतिकूल व्यवहार करने वाले परायों के प्रति यदि मेरा मन द्रोह करे तो अनंत संसार को ही परागति मानने वाले उस परायों से तो मुझ मुमुक्षु में क्या फर्क रह जाएगा. One more time. मुझसे प्रतिकूल व्यवहार करने वाले परायों के प्रति यदि मेरा मन द्रोह करे तो अनंत संसार को ही परागति मानने वाले उन परायों से मुझ मुमुक्षु में क्या फर्क रह जाएगा. Okay, so let me translate that into English. He says, if my mind gets disturbed by the conduct of people who are inimical to me, they are criticizing me. If my mind gets disturbed by the conduct of people who create a disturbance in me, then in what way am I any better than them? Those who have not yet received this secret to success that Vedanta has given me and are ignorantly involved in this world of plurality and don't see the limitations of the worldly life. I've taken some liberty in some words here and there, so let me read it one more time. He says, my mind gets disturbed by the conduct of people who are inimical to me. Then in what way am I any better than those who are involved in the outside world and are criticizing me? So we are equal. I'm criticizing them and they're criticizing me. This doesn't really get me anywhere. How are you any better? You're supposed to be better. If you've received this instructions from some qualified teachers to give you some insight into something which is not normally available, then you should really have a sense of relief, not pride yet, but relief and expectation and trust and shraddha that I am really onto something. And it's not as though you don't try to talk to others about it, but if they're not receptive, that's okay. I remember this one incident that happened. This is in the first year of the 2 years, almost like the end of the first year, it seems like, of the 2-year course that I was involved in, 2.5-year course in PRC with Swami Dayanandji. And I still remember that incident so well. So there was a student who was actually not full-time at the ashram with us, but he was a very sincere student, and he still is here around in this area. I won't mention his name. A Spanish-speaking gentleman. And he used to come as often as he could because he was running a business in Oakland at that time. But he was a very, very sincere student. And he would come and visit the ashram and listen to Swamiji as often as he could. So in one of the satsangs, there was some talk about kind of like, how fortunate we are. And he used some interesting language, which was, he should have been more careful, but he said something like, I still remember this so well. He said, as compared to the ordinary people, and then he had a bunch of things that he wanted to say. And usually, if you've ever known Swami Dayanandji, his name Dayananda is not an accident. I think Swami Chinmayanandji chose it very well. He was the embodiment of Daya. Daya means kindness and so on. He was always a very, very effusive, gentlemanly towards the others. But I remember on this one, Swamiji sort of woke up and he wanted to give a message. He said, "What did you just say? Did I hear you say that compared to the ordinary people?" So this student actually got a little embarrassed, and but he admitted. He says, "Yeah." Swamiji says, "Listen, you are not extraordinary. No one is ordinary, no one is extraordinary. Don't think like that. Because if you think like that, your progress would be stopped." And we were all sitting around. We had never really articulated the same things, but we could have. We could have. And so I still remember, this was a Gyanankusham at that point with Swamiji. He says, to consider oneself extraordinary just because you have been introduced to the Vedantic Insights is a mistake. And why is it a mistake? Because you have not yet accomplished what it is meant to. He says, I don't think you've accomplished. I knowing you, you are still at ground level. You haven't even taken the steps. So we were all sitting there and saying, oh my God, because we all had some kind of I did too. I must say, I used to have this feeling, oh, I'm so lucky compared to the others. And I am, no doubt I was lucky. But I was mistakenly saying that I was lucky because now I have reached a certain point. Yeah, I had not reached anything. I had got so many problems later on in my life that I had to sort out through Mananam and Nididhyasanam, and I'm still sorting it out. Not completely done yet. But at that time, compared to where I am now, I used to feel, I know a lot. And I tried to, I tell you, my own behavior was such that I would just pick up a conversation with somebody. How are you? And the gist of the whole conversation was somehow I wanted to tell them what I'm doing and how great I am that I'm doing this. And it took me a long time to figure out nobody cares how you are. Don't waste time trying to impress anybody. Just be what you are. It took me a while, years. So this is the thing. If it's not as though you, as we will see, why criticizing others. See, this is an important thing to see. Why criticizing others is a pratibandhaka to you. For a praptasya praptihi. So the question is that if it is an acquisition already acquired, gain of the already gained, then why don't I see it? You don't see it because there are some obstacles. Obstacles is a very encouraging sign. I think we have talked about this before. That there is nothing wrong with your eyes. It's just that they're covered by cataract. This is a great discovery. My God, if supposing you go to the doctor and say, Doctor, I can't see anything. This happened to my younger brother. He could not see anything from one eye. And there was a great deal of concern. And he was saying, my God, we've had some issues with both my sister and brother. I have been so lucky, fortunate that I haven't had any eyesight issues. I have a lot of other issues, but not the eyesight issue. But in both of their cases, they've had some problems. So he went to the doctor, and he was fully prepared to say, my God, you are getting older and you have a problem. You're losing your eyesight. Very fortunately, it was not a cataract. It turned out to be some other laser surgery that could easily correct it. Within an hour, he came back. He was okay. So this is called a pratibandhaka. So pratibandha means an obstacle. It's a very encouraging thing. So for a Atmagya, these are pratibandha that are preventing me from understanding that I have this great gift that I should just inquire into. It requires a lot of inquiry, unobstructed inquiry. But in the meantime, I'm just silly in doing things that have nothing to do with it, about this inquiry. So all these are really obstacles that we are talking about. So this Gyanankusha is that the last time when we saw was that this is a very complex world, and Ishvara has to make people based on all those 4 factors that we saw last time. And so you should understand the the artistry of Ishvara in making everybody different from each other, and they are what they are. Why does it bother you? Why do you have to twist people to be like what you want to be? This is insulting the handiwork of Ishvara. So that's what we saw last week. This week we are saying in verse number 5, that you are hurting yourself by criticizing Anatmagya, just like the Atmagya is also criticizing you. So the Anatmagya, they criticize you, which we see very constantly. Why are you studying this Vedanta? Isn't this very selfish? Should you not be working towards the welfare of the society? You remember the example we gave about this sadhu who went to receive bhiksha at somebody's place. And so this lady comes out, or maybe the man, I don't know which was in the story, and he started really berating him and said, "Hey, you look like a healthy person. Why don't you work? Why are you begging? I don't understand this." And so the sadhu said, "Okay, fine, that's all right." And then he started to move again, and then he came back and he was being critical. And the sadhu said, "Anything else you want to say, sir?" So he says, "What shameless person you are! You asking me to give you bad words? Aren't they enough? You're just like a good for nothing sadhu." And he says, "No, sir, I'm not a good for nothing sadhu. You're treating me like an animal. That if you put a danda on the animal, he goes away, and then you will give a grass to the cow comes back, as Adi Shankara says in the introduction to Brahma Sutra. That how are we any different from the animals? Because if you really give them the red eye and say, 'Get out of here,' the pious guy will go away. And then you say, 'Oh, but okay, come back, I will give you something.' Then the guy comes back and he says, 'See, you are still a bugger. I told you not to go back.' Just like the cow does. You give him a danda and the cow says, 'Okay, if you want to give me a danda, a stick, I will move away.' And then he says, 'No, have some grass, please come.' So he says, 'Okay, I'll come.' And so the sadhu says, 'No, you don't think that you don't know what a Mahatma is. You think I'm an animal. I can just be at your beck and call. So I'm not, it doesn't really bother me. If you want to give it, give. It's okay. If you don't want to give, perfectly okay. I'll go to someplace else.' So now the Anatmagya, and we see this behavior. I see the behavior even with myself. I tell you, because it's taken me a while to carve out. In fact, my talking to you in these classes is a great blessing for me, because I'm able to protect myself. My wife also, for example, would say, "Oh, today we cannot go anywhere." Today was a very sad day for us, because one of our best friends was cremated today. Pranji Lodhia, who was a great friend of ours, and was a very. I'm actually very, very happy that I introduced him to Swami Chinmayananji, and then he became a very big office bearer of Swamiji's. And of course, then we kind of parted company, because I went with Swami Dayananda. And so the entire Chinmaya mission I was out of touch with. even though I have a lot of gratitude towards Swami Chinmayananji. But Pranji was a board of director and a right-hand person, and a couple of years back he developed some blood cancer and he survived for a long time, and finally he died on Saturday, and today was his cremation at 1 o'clock. And I was just saying that my wife is now very protective of me for my teaching time and so on. So for example, she would say, if it gets late for you, she knows that I prepare my lessons for tonight's class. And so she says, why don't we take separate cars so you don't have to stay there that long because you have preparations to do. So it's very nice of her that she's protective of me. So I said, Pami, no, it's okay. I have enough time. There's no problem. So it was after that I came back and then even had a cup of tea, and so I had enough time, so there was no problem. But normally you find people criticize people who are, and many of you must have seen this, where even your own close relatives would say, what are you doing? You're not doing anything. You're just studying. Is it just selfishness? And sometimes they will say, why don't you do some social service or something like this, or just join us. So they are critical of the Atmagya, and we are critical of the Anatmagya, saying, why can't you behave better? I'm able to not criticize anybody. Why are you criticizing me? And so on and so forth. So here, Swami Maheshananji makes a very good point. He says, sometimes, you know what? We don't overtly, this is what I was going to say earlier, but I withheld it until now, that sometimes, excuse me, we don't overtly criticize somebody, or we don't say that I wish that person he should be punished for this. So this is an overt criticism. Instead, what we sometimes he says this. Swami Maheshanji says this. He says that what sometimes we say is, you know what, God will take care of him. So it's okay. God is all-knowing. He will take care of this person. You know what this means? You are praying to God that please take care of his bad deeds. Punish him. I cannot punish him because I am very afraid. What if he beats me up? But he doesn't know where you are, so you can punish him. And he says this kind of thinking is also injurious to yourself. How this injures you, we will see in a few minutes. But the fact of the matter is that even the covert way of looking at it, even the thoughts about it and so on, obstruct you. And you should be aware of that. Who are you to pass judgment? Who are you to even ask God to pass judgment? Let God deal with people as they are. That is the law. You take care of your own deeds. Don't worry about others. And for the same reason that we went through all these three things for the last lecture, that it just wastes your time, you are disregarding the power of Ishvara, you're saying somehow Ishvara is asleep. And you wake up, please wake up and then make sure that you punish this person. No reason to do that. So that is the one thing, that it flows from the fact that how are you any better? You're supposed to be better. If we want to complete the journey of understanding what Atmavidya is all about, then there is a lot to be done. And you, by distracting yourself, you are hurting yourself. Because otherwise people say, this all looks very theoretical, then how do I realize it? How do you realize it? By making sure that you look at where you are making the mistake on a day-to-day basis. That's how you realize it. It is a fact. And so if you want to go back to the facts of this deal, then what is this distinction that you talk about? The distinction between the Atmagya and the Anatmagya. So let's look into that a little bit. Because this is really just like another way of teaching. This is an aspect of the teaching itself. So what happens is that for a Anatmagya, if you want to call it the ordinary people, after having given you that story about the ordinary people, but really we all begin by having an ordinary personality. Ordinary personality means you just deal with things as they are and etc., etc. You know that. Samsari, as a samsari. Then we have to rise above it by looking at the truth of it. So, as an Anatmagya, one of the characteristics of an Anatmagya, that we follow our mind. We follow our mind. How? Because our mind proposes things and says, I'm not very happy right now. But if we did this, that would be good. So let us do this. So you say, really? Should we? Says, yeah, absolutely. I promise. I promise that as soon as you embark on this action, you will be happy. So you say, okay. The mind says that, I've been telling you that, and the very simple part of that is, for example, when you're hungry. When you're hungry, your mind says, you please eat as soon as possible. And you say, are you sure? What do you mean I'm sure? Every time you're hungry, I told you to eat, and you ate, and you were happy, and you were thanking me. So this is another one of those. So I don't understand why you are questioning this. So similarly, the mind leads you into pursuits based on what it says will give you happiness. And I accept it because that gives me some immediate gratification. And the fact that the gratification does not last, I ignore. I not ignore because I expect the gratification not to last. This is a very interesting thing that you have hunger that comes up within a few hours of your eating. So you have a respite for a few hours, you're free for a while, you can do anything, you can be watching television and so on, but pretty soon the hunger will come back. And Swami Maheshanji gives an example. He says, it is something like if you have a prisoner in a jail for some very serious crimes, and he's been jailed for the rest of his life. Okay, but the guy is now well behaved. He's getting older. He doesn't have all the wrong things that he used to do and so on. But he's jailed now. He might have done something really bad, so he's now jailed. So there is a law in the books of the jail that after a while, if a person behaves in the jail in a very trustworthy manner, then he is allowed to go out of the jail for 1 month to visit his family. So there's, I guess he mentions, Swami Maheshaji mentions it, and he wouldn't mention it unless this was true. So he says that this person is allowed to go for a week or a month. And nowadays there are these remote controls that ask you not to leave the city or some kind of a boundary, and they can monitor it. If you try to escape, then they can come catch you. But as long as you stay outside, you can be with your family, you can be watching movies, you can go to the movies, go to restaurants, anything you want to do. After 1 month, though, you come back to the jail. So you have temporary freedom. So he says that in our life, if you just think about it, just close your eyes. This is exactly what our situation is. We have moments where I feel free, but these moments don't last very long. I'm back again to feeling I am bound. And the hunger is a very good example of that. You cannot just say, okay, I just had a wonderful meal, I'm not going to eat again. Yes, you are. Right now, this is what happens. People say, oh, I had a late meal. That's what happened to me after coming back from the funeral. I think my wife and I had a late meal at about 3 o'clock. And quite frankly, I didn't even, before I started a class, I usually eat something, but I didn't feel like it because my stomach was full. But I had a little bit, some salad that I had just so that if I finish the class by 9:30, then I won't be able to eat anything before going to sleep. So anyway, you are bound by hunger. Similarly, you are bound by other things. So here, Swamiji says that even if you want to go to heaven, whether you have done a lot of punya, and you have really visited the temple and do all the yagas, and you have done dhanam, and you have prayed, and so on and so forth, all of those kinds of things, agnihotra karmani, etc., then you have a chance to go to heaven. But heaven is temporary. It is just like you are free for a while, but then your punyas exhaust themselves. You cannot get new punyas there. There's no karma in heaven. Just like, for example, if you go to Hawaii, supposing unless you take a domicile and you change your state or something like this, you cannot say, oh, this is so nice. I think I want to work for a while and then extend my stay. You can't do that. Yes, very difficult to do, if not impossible. So you just exhaust your money, which is your punya. And after 1 week, as you know, at the very bottom of the door, there is a bill and say, Mr. Kapoor, your checkout time is 11 o'clock. And your 1 week's $5,785.22 are due. And then that's it. Then you come back in a crowded, with mask on, sitting in the middle seat. All the fun of Hawaii is gone. And 6 hours, there is no food. and the person next to you is snoring so badly, and there's the children crying, gone is the fun. So really speaking, the Anatmagya lives a life like that. As we do too. We do too. But an Atmagya is told. Can I say something, Mr. Student or Miss Student? Your swarupa, your nature is totally different. First of all, it is nityaha. Nityaha means satswarupa. You're always here now. I am here now. I am here now. Not with respect to the body, but just you are. This is what is called nityaha. Buddha. Chitsvarupa. I know. I am and I know. Muktaha. Muktaha means one which is already free. There is nothing in the same level that can bind you. Just like the akasha, the rooms cannot bind the akasha. I think that it binds the akasha, but it is wrong. Once I think about it, it is muktaha. Shuddhaha. Shuddhaha means one which is untainted. No pollution can touch space. So this is your swarupa. This is your swarupa. Your not swarupa is not like you are hungry and you have to eat again and again, but you are nityaha. This is what it says. Well, if I am all these things, then how do I not feel that? That's a good question. It is an excellent question. In fact, we want to ask you, why don't you feel that? Well, I don't feel that. There, the Shastra says, it is very much like you have gotten drunk. You had a bit too much to drink. Instead of just having a teeny bit of wine, as I was mentioning to you, there were a couple of cases in my life where I really got drunk, where I didn't know what was happening. So you've got drunk. So here the classical example given the Shastra is that you have this, and Swami Maheshanji gives this example. He says there was in Mount Abu, there was a construction worker. They were getting some work done on their ashram or some mandir or something. And there were a lot of construction workers. And the construction workers are well paid, relatively speaking, because they come from the villages where they don't get much wages, but they come to the city and now they are good wage earners. And they spend it on alcohol, on getting drunk in the evening after their hard work is over and so on. So Swamiji says that one time I found this guy who was one of the workers in the construction of it, and I was walking and he says, Swamiji, can I tell you a tale? Swamiji knew that he was a little drunk, but I didn't know how drunk he was. He says, the local king, this is an actual case that Swamiji was mentioning. I think I've talked about this. The king told me, I like the chappals that you are wearing. Can you sell those chappals to me? And I said, oh Raja, you may be a Raja, but I am richer than you. I will never sell my chappals to you. And the king fell down and he was begging me, and I said, no way. So pretty soon then somebody said, hey, what the heck are you doing here? Get away from Swamiji. He says, sir, I'm very sorry. With this guy, he's got a huge problem of drinking. And when he does that, he just imagines he's the super king and all that. Swamiji says, do you know something? This is exactly how we are. This is what we are. We are drunk from the alcohol of Maya Shakti. And we say, oh, I'm bound. Even though I'm not bound, but I say, no, I am bound. Hey, I'm not, you're okay. Don't you see you're okay? Just you're bound only because you identify with things that are binding, apparently binding you. You are identifying with the walls of this space, walls of this room, and therefore, being space, you feel I'm bound. And because you are in the nasha. You are drunk with some kind of a wrong notion. And so we just try to calm down and to really allow the drunken state of the Maya Shakti to understand you are okay the way you are. This is what you need to do. So if you are in the process of doing that, what you need to do, if you want to really accelerate the process of really getting rid of this, of the drunkenness, you need to take some antidotes. Take some coffee maybe. You cannot drink some more alcohol on top of that. That will make it worse. So the state of the mind that is free of the alcohol is the sattvic state. So the sattvic state is where I do not have much of rajas and tamas. Because the Anatmagya has plenty of rajas and tamas. Rajas means a competitive spirit. I must do this. Even if, so Swami Maheswaranji gives this point that, the distinction between rajas and tamas. Rajas, of course, means that you have a lot of desires. And so much so that even if it hurts somebody, you don't care. But you gain from it. Your main objective is that I want to succeed. I want to get this. This is one of the, when a diksha is given. Swami Dayananji used to tell us, and I have attended so many dikshas where people were made swamis. My guess would be that I've seen maybe about a couple of dozen swamis being made in front of because I would go to the Rishikesh ashram in the Mahashivaratri days. Sometimes I would even go to the Anaikati. Anaikati only happened once, but most of the time it was in Rishikesh, on the side of the Ganga, where half a dozen people were given Diksha. And so Swamiji talked about that. And he says that one of the pratigya, one of the sankalpa that a new Swami is given to make is that I will never hurt anybody. And when you desire something you probably hurt someone. So the desire also, rajasic is also part of the of being hurting someone, taking away from someone. Competition, for example. We want to really talk about that. This is why in a Swami's case, when a Diksha is given, the pratigya is, I will not eat anything unless it is given to me. Bhiksha. This is why it is bhiksha. Bhiksha dehe. Please give me bhiksha. And in India, of course, it's a beautiful country where bhiksha is given. Here that concept is not there. But this is why the teachers, as a reward for their teaching, is given bhiksha. And so the sense of competition is not there. So rajasic is number one thing. Then the other one is tamas. The tamas is worse because it means that even if I don't gain anything, I don't want anybody else to gain anything. So this is much more damaging to myself. But both the sattvic and the tamasic attitude really provide obstacles in the understanding that I am nityaha, shuddhaha, muktaha, buddhaha, and swarupaho. I don't understand that because I get distracted. I need to really think about that. How is that possible? And so, in the final analysis, I would say that the difference between a Atmagya and Anatmagya, in summary, is this. Because the Anatmagya follows the mind, and the mind is saying, follow me, let's get this gratification. We'll worry about the other things later. Right now you are unhappy. Let us do this. Follow me. And I don't have an answer to that. And so I said, okay, I'll follow you. This is interesting. Swami Maheshananji gives this point. I think I mentioned this the other day. He says the mind is such a rascal because, first of all, it says, just follow me. Just do what I tell you. And then you say, are you sure? He says, yeah, do it. So you do it and you suffer because of something. You know, you're supposed to eat only one samosa, 2 idlis, some sambar, little bit of rice. But you feel, and this is what happens. If you go to some place when it is free, somehow the getting things free makes our mind go haywire. If you have to pay for it, then there is some control. But supposing it is free, there is a buffet. On the buffet line, instead of taking one samosa, the mind says, go ahead, it's free, take another one. Are you sure? No, take it. These things, you don't eat this every day. And you have a good diet. But today I think it's no problem. So you take 2 samosas. Then you go to idli and have another one, 2 or 3 idlis, it's no problem. And then you have some rice. What about naan? Oh, yes, have naan. And then you take some naan. And then you take some sweet dish, some dessert. And your plate is so full. And you're very happy today. I really ate to my heart's desire, my mind's desire. And then you go home and your tummy is aching and you have a heartburn and you tell your mind, why did you make me do this? I don't understand this. And the mind says, why didn't you listen to me? I can tell you whatever I want to do, but you have your own wisdom. How come you could not stop yourself? You have such a weak mind, I cannot believe it. You're not going to go anywhere. You don't. Swamiji says, the same mind that is saying, come on, you can do it. You do it, it's okay. And the same mind says, you're such a fool, why did you listen to me? So the Anatmagya follows the mind and gets, and it's okay because there's no alternative. But if you have an alternative as an Atmagya, then the same thing becomes an obstacle, and you need to see that. So there, an Atmagya, it says here somewhere that the Atmagya tells the Ishvara, can you guide me rather than my stupid mind? I'm tired of following this fickle mind, and instead, I'm sitting in a ditch. I'm 70 years of age, and I haven't really done anything worthwhile. Life is passing, and my fate is laughing at me. And in the short time that I have, could you now guide me? What is it that I need to do? So in Atmagya, it says that I'm like a child. Like a child says, I don't know what to do, you tell me. Similarly here it says, so this is exactly the prayer of all the important prayers, including the mantras. Om Bhur Bhuva Swaha. So Gayatri mantra. Om Bhur Bhuva Swaha Tat Savitur Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yo Naf Prachodayat. Dhiyo Yo Naf Prachodayat. That's the important one. The first one is simply Om Bhu Bhuvaha Swaha Tat Savituhu Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yaha Naha Prachodayat. May you please get hold of my wisdom, my buddhi, and lead it the way it should be led. Because I've been following my own mind up to now, and I'm in not a good shape. And I've realized my mistake. And you've already given me the introduction of the Atmagya. Complete it for me. And so as such, if I want to really follow through with it, then let me not unnecessarily be involved in criticizing others, because that doesn't make me, in fact, I'm even worse than them. Sometimes, I find that if I find that people don't behave well, my best way to treat them is, they don't know what they're doing. So it's okay for them to behave in a certain way. And so I shouldn't criticize them. Instead, I should uphold my own standards. and keep it up through forgiveness. This is the main wisdom in this Gyanankusham number 5, which says that please understand that you're supposed to be better than others. And if you criticize others just like they're criticizing you, how are you better? So be aware of that as you go through. Okay, so with that, I close the class today and see if you have any questions. Om Asato Ma Satgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Virendra Singh says that in Mahabharata and Gita, Bhagwan Sri Krishna advises Arjuna to fight and destroy evil persons like Duryodhana. Is it dharma to allow injustice and atyachara, adharma, nishkama karma yoga? Is it dharma to allow injustice and atyachara, nishkama karma yoga? No, it isn't. That's not the definition of nishkama. So nishkama means kama varjitaha, one which is devoid of desire. So to destroy people like Duryodhana is required by the situation. It is required by it is not something that you came up with and saying, I think this is a terrible thing to do. It was all agreed by the society that this is not the right thing to do, and in fact your job as a warrior is to protect the good against the evil. That is your duty. So there's a question of desire. This is the difference between what is called kamya karma, which is desire prompted action, and nimitta naimittika karma, which is duty based karma. So this is a duty based karma, and so this is not. So this is part of the nishkarma in the sense that it is not desire oriented karma, but duty oriented karma, and by doing that your sense of well-being and self-appreciation will be enhanced. So this is exactly the whole topic of sannyasa versus karma. So karma yoga is the sadhana towards sannyasa, towards jnana yoga. And so in that sense, the jnana yoga, you can do sarva karma sannyasa, nishkarma karma. So something like that. Right. Very good. Thank you for attending the class, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Hari Om.